Washington Post reporter David Nakamura is in Washington. So, David, what's your take on the president's assessment that, quote, the G-20 summit was a great success for the U.S.?
Well, there's a number of pieces to this, Elaine. It was a big summit. He had a lot of meetings with world leaders, but of course the headliner was his meeting with Putin. You know, the White House leading up to that meeting set kind of a low bar because they said, look, there's no agenda. It's what the president wants to talk about. And they would not commit to him bringing up this election meddling. And it's almost like now they're saying that he charged in there and put it right on the table as though they're sort of wanting kudos just for that. But what we did not see on this entire trip was President Trump speaking in public and declaring unequivocally that he believes Russia did meddle and he's not going to stand for it. And he told Putin that Russia was going to pay a price for it. Instead, it's all about working with Russia. And of course, there are major areas where the United States would like Russian cooperation, including Syria, and the fact that they have a no-fly zone, maybe hammered out, at least the broader constructs of it, is important. But or I should say a ceasefire zone. But it's important. But ultimately, this issue of Russia is not going to go away until we see the president really come out and declare unequivocally his view that Russia did meddle, and of course that this investigation will continue, and once we find out the full extent of what exactly happened during the campaign, which could take several months.
So, David, as you know, the president tweeted Sunday that, quote, Putin and I discussed forming an impenetrable cybersecurity unit so that election hacking and many other negative things will be guarded. How is that suggestion likely to be received?
It's already not going over very well. I mean, you're basically saying, look, we want to work with the country that meddled. And, President Obama, there are other countries, President Trump is right, that do, use cyber espionage, cyber hacking. President Obama and Xi Jinping of China had a big summit a couple years ago in which cyber hacking of U.S. businesses for trade secret was a big issue on the table, and both sides agreed to sort of set up some parameters to try to make sure this didn't happen. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think the bigger question is that Russia didn't just meddle in the U.S. elections. This is something they've done in other countries, and they have very sophisticated means, not just of sort of hacking in the way that they stole emails from the Democratic Party and Democratic officials, but also campaigns on social media, influence campaigns that they attempted here and have done elsewhere. So there's all sorts of areas where the Russians are probing our systems. We had a report in the Washington Post just this morning about hacks that appear to be aimed at the nuclear power industry in the United States, apparently by Russian hackers. We don't know the extent of that. So this is a broad-ranging issue, and again, we just don't see. I think what the problem here for the Trump administration is the president himself is just not fully articulating a solid point of view on this.
Well, Republican Senator Marco Rubio responded to this suggestion on Twitter by saying, quote, partnering with Putin on a cybersecurity unit is akin to partnering with Assad, president of Syria, on a chemical weapons unit. Of course, Assad has used chemical weapons on his own people. So the question I would ask is, was there any telegraphing ahead of time before this tweet that perhaps this was something the White House and the U.S. was considering? And how serious a suggestion by the president do you think this is?
I mean, it sounds like this was something that it was not talked about ahead of the meeting. It sounds like it's something that the White House did sort of roll out at the G20 after the summit with Putin, that there would be this sort of collaborative body and continued discussions between the two countries over cyber hacking. And again, I'm not sure that that's something that you shouldn't necessarily do, but I think it's all a part of a broader construct where the White House seems to be saying, look, we addressed it at the summit, we agreed to sort of disagree, we're moving on, and we're going to move forward, and that's it. But this is a president who, even on this trip in a speech in Warsaw, the president talked about the President Obama had not done enough. He continues to say that about when the United States found out last summer that the Russian had attempted to influence the election, that President Obama did not do enough. But now he is not actually announcing any more punitive packages. It's almost like they're saying, look, we haven't rolled back other sanctions related to Ukraine, and that shows we're being tough. But again, if he's saying that President Obama did not do enough, yet he himself is not taking any stronger action to punish Russia, that's a big question. And people, I think most of the people don't necessarily think that Vladimir Putin would be trusted to handle his side of some sort of commission to not meddle in the election. And the message that he has taken and that Russia has taken is that there are no consequences for these actions.
Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that the president pressed Putin on the Russian meddling in the election, and yet just a day before in Poland, President Trump said this when asked about the meddling.
I think it Could very well have been Russia, but I think it could well have been other countries, and I won't be specific. But I think a lot of people interfere. I think it's been happening for a long time. It's been happening for many, many years.
So, David, is that a contradiction between what the Secretary of State seemed to suggest and what we heard from the president himself? And if so, what might that suggest to allies and adversaries, particularly Russia?
Well, I think that it is a contradiction. It's something that President Trump has tried to sow doubt to some degree in this question about Russia's involvement and any connections to his campaign. And as this investigation by the FBI continues, the president continues to sort of try to undermine, I think, public perception of exactly what happened, even though I think four of the major intelligence agencies, with no pushback from any of the others, have basically concluded that Russia meddled. And so, yes, it does send conflicting messages. It sends conflicting messages about where this administration is on, something as central as our democracy around the world. And, you have other, countries who are sort of dealing with regimes that are more autocratic. And, Trump seems to be suggesting that, again, the United States is not going to hold Russia accountable for this. And, another big problem of this meeting for perception, the White House is trying to claim victory. You played the clip of Reince Priebus saying that, Trump took him on 2 or 3 times. Reince Priebus was not in the room. Only Rex Tillerson was in the room for the U.S. side. Only Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, was in for the Russian side along with Putin. And so you have both sides being able to sort of spin their points of view, but not a real reliable account of exactly what happened.
And David, your paper is out with a report today that Donald Trump's eldest son arranged a meeting with Trump campaign officials, including Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort, with a Russian lawyer linked to the Kremlin during the campaign. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, I mean, this story is really interesting because it was another undisclosed meeting between members of the Trump campaign with somebody who not only is from Russia but has connections, deep connections to the Kremlin. And it's what's also not clear about it is they're suggesting this meeting had to do with sort of an adoption program, U.S. folks trying to adopt Russian children that had been stopped by the Obama administration over other actions that Russia had taken. And basically the idea was that they were going to try to talk about a way to sort of restart this. But I think that the question is why Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman, why Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, who now has a seat in the Oval Office, were involved in this meeting, if in fact it had nothing to do necessarily with the election. So again, it raises more questions, and you see the president already on the defensive this morning with some of these tweets, again saying it's fake news and the media just needs to move on.
Meantime, David, as you know, lawmakers are set to return from their July 4th recess. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was forced to delay a vote on health care. Where do things stand now for the Senate?
Well, now it's a really crunch time because they're going to try to have a vote on this in the next 3 weeks or so before Congress takes their month-long a recess in August. And we know that Mitch McConnell really wanted to have the vote before this past week's recess for the July 4th break. And so the idea was that they didn't want to have to face some of the angry protest or electorate that is not in favor of this bill, which has very low public approval ratings. And now you're seeing that Mitch McConnell has offered a number of modifications that are going to be scored by the Congressional Budget Office, presumably if they can find a lower sort of threshold for the number of people who may be uninsured going forward, they can maybe sort of repackage this as another effort. There's also a question of whether they would just do a straight repeal and not replace now if they can't find enough Republican support for the bill that McConnell is considering. But that's, again, something that also would have a lot of troubling implications. So they have their hands full. The question will be interesting is to see how much the White House will be involved in trying to sell this, both to the public, to give political cover, but also to wavering senators, especially some of the moderate ones who are really critical for this bill to be passed by the Republicans.
All right, as always, a lot to watch in Washington. David Nakamura. David, thanks so much.
Sure, thanks, Elaine.